Welcome to the Process Breakdown Podcast, where we talk about streamlining and scaling operations of your company, getting rid of bottlenecks, and giving your employees all the information they need to be successful at their jobs. Now, let's get started with the show.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, host of the Process Breakdown Podcast, where we talk about streamlining and scaling operations of your company, getting rid of bottlenecks, and giving your staff everything they need to be successful at their job. Past guests include David Allen and Getting Things Done, Michael Gerber of The E-Myth, and many, many more. Before I get to today's amazing guests, this episode is brought to you by SweetProcess. Now, if you've had team members ask you the same questions over and over again, and it's maybe the 10th time you spent explaining it, none of us experienced that, right, Peter? None of us, right? There's a better way. There's a solution. SweetProcess is a software that makes it drop dead easy to train and onboard new staff and save time with existing staff. Not only do universities, banks, hospitals, and software companies use them, but I was talking to Owen and he said, you know, Jeremy, first responder government agencies actually use us in life or death situations to run their operations. I'm like, hey, if it's good for them, it's good enough for me. So use SweetProcess to document all the repetitive tasks. You could sign up for a free 14-day trial, no credit card required. You can go to sweetprocess.com, sweet like candy, SWEET process.com. I'm excited. You know, you talk about Adi, and I'm going to introduce her in a second. Like, she's the person that will actually make sure you're doing this and so much more. Right, Adi? So Adi Klevit is founder of Business Success Consulting Group, and what her company does, they help business owners and entrepreneurs and key executives improve their process and documentation and the long-lasting systems that are necessary to support that business expansion. Because here's the thing, without systems or without the proper systems, we can't grow. Okay? Not only can't grow, but we can't function, actually, Adi. So Peter Nelson is here. He's the president of Marc Nelson Oil Products. And since 1936, they've been supplying commercial petroleum energy products to their customers. And Peter's actually a third generation. And if you like, I know, Peter, you look so young. You started this in 1936. But no, he's third generation. His grandfather actually started the company. And before that, his grandfather was a school teacher in a one-room schoolhouse in Oregon before he started this. So thank you both for joining me.
Well, thank you for having us, Jeremy.
Good to be here.
You know, I'm going to have you take me on this journey. Peter, talk about just your company and what you do, and just to give people context.
Okay, we supply mostly diesel, probably 65% of our sales are diesel, some gasoline, some lubricants, and supply those products in a couple of ways. We have we're a franchisee on a couple of fleet fueling networks, Pacific Pride and CFN, and we have those are unattended fueling stations where we keep those tanks full and our customers drive there to buy fuel. Then the other way we get our product to the marketplace is we have our own fleet of trucks, and we deliver bulk products to customers who have their own storage tank. So whether it be 100 gallons of hydraulic oil or 11,000 gallons of gasoline. Wow. We deliver that product.
And then I was reading, I think you have 11 locations all over besides the trucks, or?
We have 11 Pacific Pride and CFN sites. Mm-hmm. And then we have 4 bulk plants, but a Pacific Pride or a CFN card holder can go to any Pacific Pride. And so there's, throughout the country, there's about 1,600 branded Pacific Pride sites and another 2,200 branded CFN sites. And then in addition to that, there's several tens of thousands of retail locations that take the Pacific Pride card and the CFN card.
Oh. So to say, Peter, there's a lot of moving pieces is an understatement.
Well, there's a few, yeah.
So how much staff does it take to run all of this?
We have 55 employees.
Nice. And so I want to talk about when you were looking and searching for someone like Adi. Okay. What was going on in the business that you wanted to solve? What were some of the challenges that you wanted to look at?
Well, Adi and I met because I wanted someone to help me with a strategic operating plan, which I had put together several years ago, and I refreshed it about every other year, and I was getting a little burnout on that process, and I hired Adi to give me a fresh look at it. So, and a fresh set of eyes and a new mind to focus on what I was trying to do with that strategic operating plan. She helped me with that, and then we continued to talk, and I expressed to her that I felt a need to document our processes, procedures, policies. Much more, well, we didn't have it documented at all. So when I had somebody leave, a lot of knowledge would go out the door with them. And so Adi talked to me about SweetProcess. And we started working together on documenting many aspects, operational aspects and administrative aspects of the company process.
Yeah. So when someone leaves, they were leaving with all this knowledge, and then it took a lot of training for the next person. Is that?
The learning curve was huge for the next person, very long learning curve for the next person to come in behind. Say a long-term employee, you have someone here that's been 10 or 12 years. I have some people here that have been here longer than 20 years. Wow. And so they really know the business. And not everything is written down, and it isn't written down in a precise, clearly defined manner. And so, when somebody leaves, it's painful.
Yeah. Adi, I want to talk to you, and we'll get to SweetProcess in a second. But so you meet with Peter, and he's like, I have this strategic operating plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking you have a mind that seems to work probably in structure, order, process. What your fresh set of eyes, what did you see in general?
Well, what I saw in general was that exactly what Peter was talking about, the need to have a documentation in place because there was turnover. And there was also problems in terms of communication because somebody would not be able to communicate to another person in terms of what needs to be done. And the cross-training was also a big problem. So all of those were problems that could have been remedied very easily with having well-documented processes and procedures. So that's the project we embarked on.
When you go into a business in general, what are the things you're looking at to help them?
So I'm looking at what do they want to achieve? What stage is the business in? If they want to grow and scale, I look at the systems that are in place to see if they can actually achieve that growth and the scaling. And it's really identifying the pain points that the business is going through and then utilizing the tools and the systems and the procedures in order to remedy that.
And the common pain points are around not having system. What do you typically see when you walk in?
It's onboarding new employees. Training is a big one. Like Peter was mentioning, the learning curve. So if the business is growing and you're looking at hiring 5 new employees, let's say, that are doing the same position. Let's say you are hiring salespeople or, accounting or whatever area of the company that you are hiring, and now you are looking into training them, and there is a long training curve. And if it requires also to take employees off of what they are doing on a day-to-day operation or to train a new person, that impedes business from growing. It's basically puts a cap to the growing because they don't want to hire, right? Mm. Or if you have also employees that are not performing the best and then you don't want to let them go or you don't want to replace them because you are basically held hostage by their knowledge. Like exactly what Peter was saying, the knowledge just goes out the door. And so you need to document that so you can actually be able to grow and scale. So that's one aspect that I see very often. I also see the aspect of efficiency. the fact that people are not doing the same. They are supposed to have an organized and pretty standardized procedures, but they don't. Each one has their own way, so it's not optimized, etc. So those are areas.
And Adi, how did you discover SweetProcess?
So I was, what I do is I document processes and procedures and improve processes. I do process improvement. And about 4 years ago, I was researching for a process documentation software. And I was actually on Google researching, and then I found SweetProcess. I found others, but then I tried them all. And I really like SweetProcess. There are a lot of aspects that I like about it. And so I contacted Owen, who is the CEO. And Owen was very receptive. So I recommend SweetProcess to many of my clients. And every time there is something that I see a feature that needs to be added or something needs to be changed, I email or call Owen, and him and his team are so receptive. So that's why we have such a good working relationship.
Yeah. That's huge for a company and a software. I've had the same experience with them and other people, as whereas if you send something, a request, and they listen and they're wanting to improve, you feel like they're on your side,
Absolutely. And they constantly do it. Since I started with them 4 years ago, started working with them and recommending the software to my clients, they've made so many improvements, and they have great features. Like one of them that we're using in Peter's company is the ability to review the processes on a regular basis. Because it's one thing to document them, but it's another thing to make sure that they come to life and they are actually being utilized and they are being reviewed on a regular basis. So they have that feature where you can actually assign an employee or a manager, depends on who you want to assign it, to that function of actually reviewing it on regularly, so that it comes into their inbox. They will have the email saying you need to revise it or review it, and then they go and review. They do make any revisions, any additions, any editing, and then mark it is done.
What do you use it for with Peter? What kind of things for the business do you use SweetProcess for?
Well, Peter, we documented everything in the business. I mean, all aspects of the business. We documented all departments, everything. I think we including the administrative stuff like HR, accounting, the credit department, and every aspect of the actual fuel delivery and card lock, etc. So all the departments in the company.
So yeah, we've documented policies. We don't have all our company. How long have we been working with this, Adi? It does 8 months.
Yeah, about a year. Yeah,
about 8 months. It's a long process. Literally, we had nothing documented. A few people in my accounting department had little binders that they had built for their daily tasks, weekly, monthly tasks. But we've documented everybody's reoccurring tasks in all the departments, their daily, their weekly, their monthly reoccurring tasks in accounting and operations and card lock, and even in maintenance and in the warehouse. And then we've documented job descriptions. Mm-hmm. We've documented some policy stuff, but we don't have all the policies in yet. Quite a bit of work has gone into this.
Yeah. And then what have you found most valuable, Peter, for you as an owner?
For me as an owner, I think being able to capture the knowledge of my employees and have that written down in an organized, easily readable fashion. So the onboarding process, training a new employee is easier. And the other thing that I really like is accountability. We talk a lot around here about operating above the line, and the SweetProcess helps us define the line. And if I need to make a correction with an employee, I can say, hey, are we operating above the line here, or are we operating below the line? So it helps for accountability a lot too.
Adi, you are a process-oriented person. You probably did a lot of research. What were you skeptical about with SweetProcess in the beginning?
The flexibility of being able to enter the data there so it's actually usable, because when you are, let's say you write a process on a Word document or a procedure on a Word document, you can change it easily. You can highlight different things, or you can make it more flexible as opposed to having a framework where you enter it in. But then what I found is actually that framework that you enter those processes in actually saves you time, because you don't have to deal with formatting. Everything looks the same. And I like to tell to my client to say always, when you have processes or procedures, policies for the company, make them look the same. Don't just start typing something on a Word document that has no header or it looks different, because people are not going to recognize it as a process for the company. So with SweetProcess, you don't have that problem. It's actually what I was skeptical about actually proved itself as a really good plus, because you can just enter it, not worry about formatting, because it formats it automatically. You can add pictures, you can add videos, and it really makes you think in a sequential way, because you have to think about what am I going to put in that step that makes sense, and what is going to be the header for that step. And I can just randomly just write things.
Yeah. And then Peter, for you, when Adi brought this to you, was there anything you were pushing back against? Oh, we have to do all this, or anything you were skeptical about? Because it is a lot of work,
Well, I wanted it done. It was a project that I wanted to take on.
Yeah.
I only pushed back on Adi. I don't like continuing costs. I would rather pay for something and then own it and not have to pay for it monthly. So I asked Adi to look around to find if she could find another software. She said, she looked and she says, I really think this is the best one. I like this. And it's only a few bucks a month. And so that's just my, I don't know.
As a business owner,
I was trying to be frugal, but it's worth it. It's a few bucks a month. It's not very expensive. And,
I appreciate you sharing that. I always like to hear, what people have to think about overcoming before they actually use something, because there's always something, there's no perfect in our mind. Even if it looks perfect, we're always thinking, how do I poke holes in this? What's wrong with it? So I'm glad you walked me through that process a little bit. So I want to get to, you talked about some of the big game changers of how it helps. And if you were to pick out something in your typical day that it's changed the most, and Adi, you want to start like in a typical day with, Peter, a business owner, what has been the most game changing for you in a typical day?
Well, I don't look at this every day as an owner of the business. I'm not looking at the minutia and the detail every day. So I can't say that this impacts me, on a typical day, because I might not look at it for a couple of weeks and then, get a notice that somebody's gone in and made an adjustment. And that's the one thing I really like about it. So, in a business you have, in my business, people, sometimes people come and they go, and then just whoever comes in behind that person doesn't operate the same way. And I can use this for that new person to say, this is the way we operate. And if they want to make a change, then they have to go into this software and they have to type in their change to a policy, or create a new policy, or type in a change to a process. And then I have the chance to read that. So as far as a typical day, it may not be, but maybe once or two, or once every other week, or once a month, where somebody goes in and makes a change to a process, and I get the opportunity to see that, and I go, okay, these guys are going to do this a little differently. Do I like the way they're going to do it, and am I going to approve this change, or am I going to say no, let's do it this way?
Yeah,
it gives me the opportunity for a little input.
Yeah. So as day to day, you're not in there, but it basically overarching from the company basically helps you manage things, help you, I guess what you talked about, Adi, was onboarding and training, overall. You don't have to be in the minutia, I guess, because these things are living, breathing documents.
Right. And that's exactly what business owners want. Sometimes I start working with a business owner that has his hands in the pie all the time, right? And they don't want to be involved that much in a day-to-day operation. I mean, Peter has a successful business and he also is successful as a CEO because he understands that he never wants to be there in the minor details. But how many business owners do you know that are there all the time and they don't feel like they can extract themselves? So what Peter was describing is the exact tool, because you don't need to be on a day-to-day operations as the CEO. You don't need to be there and doing all the tasks if you have the knowledge well documented and and you can trust that your team members are going to do it.
Yeah. And so, Adi, I'm going to ask a question. Peter, I want you to think about this question. I'm going to ask you next, but what's the next big goal you want to achieve in your company? Before you answer that, Adi, I want you to give everyone out there some advice on what's the next step someone listening should take to streamline operations. What are some of the next steps?
So the first step would be to ask themselves, what area of the company do they need to bring order to? Where to start, right? Because it can be an overwhelming task. You can't do all at once. It's kind of like people think about documenting the entire company and then they do nothing, right? So you have to start somewhere. And you ask yourself, okay, what area in the company, if I had well-documented processes and procedures, will get me the biggest return on investment, right? And then you have to figure out how you're going to do that. So you go into project management mode and you basically figure out you map the process and you figure out what are the main procedures that you will need to document. You assign it to the team, you start documenting it, and you document it. You start with the higher level and then you go down to the details. Do not concentrate too much on just documenting one procedure so it will be perfect all down to the details, because it will take too much time. So have the overall, the biggest, what action caused the biggest impact, and you document those actions, and then have it followed by all. You have to make sure that it's being implemented across the company, because you can write the most beautiful processes and procedures and spend a lot of time doing that, but you have to be able to implement it, meaning you have to have a system on how to make sure that people are using it. And what Peter was describing in terms of not being involved in a day-to-day operations yourself all the time, but delegate it to the team, make sure they know it, make sure they're using it, they're complying. And another piece of advice is make it part of your culture. If you're not operating off of systems right now and you don't have processes and procedures, then what I found very successful is after you document them, in order to roll it out to the team, make sure that you have a weekly meeting where you actually evaluate the issues that happened the week before in terms of what happened and what process or procedure should have been in use in order to prevent that, right? Because everything, it's either people or processes. It's a people problem or a process problem or both. So let's say we are doing the process for, let's take Peter's company, and the week before something happened, let's say a delivery didn't arrive on time. All right, so let's take that issue and let's actually go into SweetProcess and let's figure out what was the procedure that was not followed. And now let's figure out why it was not followed. Was it not followed because people did not know how to follow it? Or was it not followed because the procedure is incomplete? And if you do that, department by department, week after week for the beginning, at least the beginning until you get it well grooved in the company, you're going to make sure that you're going to create that culture where people will see that the solution is to use processes and procedures.
Yeah, I like that, because the culture is also not immediately blaming someone, but maybe blaming the process and what could be improved in the process. And I like what you said, Adi, about, looking at the big impact, because all this could be overwhelming. Peter, you're saying we need to document everything. Well, that just seems like I want to crawl in the corner and not do anything, because it's too overwhelming for me to even wrap my head around. So I like you said, choose the thing that will make the biggest impact, start there. And Peter, before I ask you this, Adi, I want to say, let's picture a CEO, someone who's like your typical visionary CEO, and maybe they're allergic to systems. They're like, it actually stresses them out to think about this. What do you say to that CEO out there or executive that just gets stressed out when thinking about this?
Well, I would ask him or her the question of what would happen? What is the benefit that you would be able to experience if you had well-documented processes and procedures? And really answer that question. And it's one for one when the CEO looks at that, then he or she comes up with the answers of like, then I will have this and this and this and that, and then they might go, well, but how are we going to get there? So it doesn't matter how, that's what I'm an expert at. Let's just look at the result, and then when you look at the result of what will actually happen if you had well-documented processes and procedures, start with the why, right?
I like that.
Why do you want it? Do you want to not work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week? Do you want to be able to sell the company in 5 years? I mean, what is it? Why do you want the systems, right? So like with Peter, for instance, we took the same approach. I was able to analyze the entire company and figure out the main silos or the main areas that need to be documented. And then we started, I asked Peter the same question, what area should we start with? And he named the area. So we did that, and then we did another one, and then another one. So it was sequential in order, and we got it all done. But you definitely need to know where to start and how to proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, think about the big benefit, the big result, and the big why. Peter, for you, what's the next big goal in the future? What does the future look like that you want to achieve with the company? Talk to me about what does that look like?
Do you want a goal as it relates to our use of SweetProcess, or do you just want a goal for what I have?
Yeah, you start with SweetProcess and then in general.
Okay, so my next big goal, we're pretty solid on getting all of our positions, having all of our positions documented now, and my next big goal is to make sure that my people are using it and that they're going in. So we have a lot of time and money invested in. So I hired a D, and she put all the data that you see in SweetProcess is completely her work. She interviewed all my employees, sat down with people and documented, they're asking questions and thoroughly documented their processes, procedures. That's all her work. But my next big goal is to make sure that my people are using it and they're reviewing it, and that if they do make a change in a policy or they do make a change in a procedure, that they're going into SweetProcess and they're documenting that change. And that's what I want to see. I want to see my people using it.
And how do you do that?
Well, Dee's going to put together that review process.
Yeah, we have a review process, and we're doing it. We are in the process of, we started it already, but the company is not changing that much. So we decided that, every 6 months to a year, reviewing the entire processes and procedures is enough. And also whenever there is, like, for instance, Peter had a change of guards in one of the departments. So when a new person came on board, then we trained her on all of the SweetProcess, and she's using it. I've seen her go in there and look at it and change and use it. So the onboarding was so much easier because the previous person that occupied that particular position actually left. So now you have a new person trying to figure it out, but she had it all documented. So that's an example.
Yeah, that's huge for onboarding. And then, so Peter, for the future for the company, what are you most excited about? What are some of the big goals you have?
Well, I want to continue to grow a little bit in the oil industry, although I kind of have an end of the runway in mind. And I'm going to try to diversify too into some other industries, some other business avenues, rather than to stay just, mainline into the oil industry. Going to try to diversify a little bit.
Yeah. And then do we have a fourth generation coming up, or what's?
Oh, my kids, I got a late start on a family. And so my kids are pretty young. And
they'll put hair on their chest. It's fine. I don't know if you have daughters or sons.
They're 20. My son's 20, and my daughter's just turned 18. So they got a long way to go. We might be out of the oil business by the time they're ready to get in it.
Fine. You'll start grooming them now. It's no problem. First of all, I want to thank both of you. This was fantastic. Everyone can check out SweetProcess.com, sweet like candy, SWEET, process.com. And thank you both.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank
you
Jeremy.
for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Process Breakdown Podcast. Before you go, quick question. Do you want a tool that makes it easy to document processes, procedures, and/or policies for your company so that your employees have all the information they need to be successful at their job? If yes, sign up for a free 14-day trial of SweetProcess. No credit card is required to sign up. Go to sweetprocess.com, sweet like candy, and process like process.com. Go now to sweetprocess.com and sign up for your risk-free 14-day trial.